The faint hum of the ship's engine sputtered out as sparks flew from the control panel. Jack groaned, slamming his fist against the console. "Piece of junk," he muttered, unstrapping himself from the pilot's seat. His emergency landing pod had done its job, barely. Outside, the alien jungle buzzed with life, an unsettling mix of chirps, growls, and rustling leaves. Jack squinted at the dense foliage. Great. Stranded on a planet that probably doesn't even have Wi-Fi. He stepped out cautiously, clutching his multi-tool like it was a weapon. The air was thick and humid, clinging to his skin like a desperate X. He muttered to himself as he trudged through the underbrush, keeping an eye out for anything that might want to eat him. Could be worse. Could be dead. Though honestly, I'm not ruling that out yet. A sudden movement to his left made him freeze. His heart pounded as he gripped his tool tighter. Out of the shadows emerged a figure, no, several. They were massive, easily 8 feet tall, and distinctly feminine. Their armor gleamed under the dappled sunlight, and their muscular frames suggested they could snap him in half without breaking a sweat. Jack instinctively took a step back, raising his hands. Hi. Friendly, right? Like not gonna eat me or anything? The tallest of the group, a woman with piercing blue eyes and intricate markings on her face, stepped forward. She jabbed a spear in his direction and spoke in a language Jack didn't understand. Her tone was commanding, and Jack didn't need a translator to know he wasn't exactly a welcome guest. Okay, no sudden moves, Jack said, trying to keep his voice calm. I come in peace. Or crash in peace. Another warrior muttered something, and the group burst into laughter. Jack wasn't sure if they were mocking him or deciding how best to cook him. Then the leader barked an order, and the group encircled him, herding him toward what he assumed was their village. Jack stumbled along, grumbling under his breath. Of course. Stranded on a planet of Amazons. Why couldn't it be a planet of hot tubs and free beer? The village was a mix of primitive and sophisticated. Large wooden structures with intricate carvings stood alongside bizarre, glowing artifacts that pulsed with alien energy. The women ushered him into a central clearing where more of their kind gathered, all towering, all armed, and all staring at him like he was the main course at a buffet. Jack swallowed hard. So, this is cozy. The leader stepped forward again, her voice booming as she addressed the crowd. Jack caught a single word that made his blood run cold. SSIES. He blinked. I'm sorry, what now? The leader pointed to him, then to a group of strange, oversized creatures lounging in the shade. They were cats, or at least something that resembled cats. Their fur shimmered with colors that seemed to shift in the light, and their eyes glowed with an unsettling intelligence. The leader spoke again, her tone firm. CP***size. Choose one. Jack's jaw dropped. Excuse me? The crowd murmured in agreement, and Jack felt a dozen eyes on him. He ran a hand through his hair, laughing nervously. Okay, little lost in translation here. You don't mean? I mean you're not asking me to. The leader's expression didn't change. She pointed to the cats again. Choose one. Jack rubbed his temples. Right. Cats. You're talking about the cats. God, I hope you're talking about the cats. The leader gestured for him to approach the creatures. Jack hesitated. The cats, or P***size, as the tribe insisted on calling them, were the size of small horses. One of them yawned, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. Jack took a step back. Yeah, no. That one's got murder written all over it. The crowd grew restless, and the leader narrowed her eyes. Choose. Jack sighed, muttering under his breath. This is how I die. Not in battle, not in glory. Eaten by a psychedelic tiger on a planet of angry supermodels. He approached the nearest cat, which eyed him with what he could only describe as disdain. Hey there, buddy. You friendly? The cat growled, and Jack jumped back. Okay, noted. Not a fan of small talk. The leader barked something, and Jack waved his hands defensively. I'm doing it. Just give me a second. Bonding with a killer alien isn't exactly in my skill set. He moved to another cat, this one lounging lazily with its tail flicking back and forth. It looked him up and down, then promptly turned its back on him. Jack sighed. Great. Even the cats think I'm a loser. The crowd began to murmur again, and Jack felt the pressure mounting. He glanced back at the leader, who crossed her arms impatiently. All right, fine. I'll pick one. But if I lose an arm, I'm blaming you. He closed his eyes and pointed at random. When he opened them, he realized he was pointing at the largest, most intimidating cat in the group. Its fur was jet black, its eyes glowing like molten gold. The murmurs turned into gasps, and the leader's eyes widened in surprise. Jack chuckled nervously. Oh, come on! That one? Really? The leader nodded solemnly. Kragna. The untamed P*SY. Jack stared at her. You've got to be kidding me. Jack stood awkwardly in the center of the clearing, a dozen glowing feline eyes fixed on him. He glanced between Kragna, the massive, jet-black beast he'd apparently just chosen, and the tribe of giant women, who now stared at him with an unnerving mix of awe and anticipation. The leader, Zaraka, stepped forward, her expression deadly serious. You have chosen, she said, her voice like thunder. Now bond. Bond? Jack echoed, his voice breaking slightly. I don't think we're using the same dictionary here. Zaraka motioned toward Kragna, who was prowling in lazy circles, its glowing eyes never leaving Jack. To earn its trust, you must show strength. Convince Kragna you are worthy. Jack laughed nervously, rubbing the back of his neck. Right, because convincing a murder panther not to eat me is my strong suit. Fantastic. The tribe watched intently as Jack edged closer to the creature. His every step felt like walking a tightrope over a volcano. Kragna sniffed the air, its ears flattening as it emitted a low growl that vibrated through Jack's chest. He froze, his heart pounding like a jackhammer. Okay, kitty, let's not do anything rash. I'm unarmed, slightly sweaty, and honestly, probably not worth the calories. One of the warriors muttered something, and Zaraka nodded. She leaned toward Jack, her tone both instructional and vaguely menacing. Touch it! Jack blinked. Touch it? Are you out of your... He stopped himself, realizing the entire tribe was waiting, their faces lit with expectation. Fine. I'll touch it. But if this thing turns me into a snack, I'm haunting all of you. Summoning every ounce of courage, or stupidity, he had, Jack extended a trembling hand toward Kragna's sleek, black fur. The creature sniffed his fingers, its glowing eyes narrowing as if it were deciding whether Jack was prey or a nuisance. Then, without warning, it let out a sharp huff, causing Jack to stumble back with a yelp. The tribe erupted in laughter, though Zaraka silenced them with a sharp glance. Kragna is testing you, she said. Do not show fear. Jack scoffed, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Oh, sure. Let me just turn off my primal survival instincts real quick. He tried again, this time keeping his hand steady. Kragna leaned in, sniffed once more, and then, surprisingly, nudged Jack's palm with its massive head. The contact sent a shiver down Jack's spine, partly from relief and partly because the creature's fur was oddly warm and faintly electric, like static in a storm. There, Zaraka said, her voice tinged with approval. It accepts your presence. Now continue. Continue? Jack asked, incredulous. What does that even mean? Should I offer it my Netflix password or something? Zaraka ignored him, gesturing for him to move closer. Jack sighed, muttering to himself as he obeyed. This is how people die in horror movies. Curious idiot gets too close to the monster, everyone else watches and learns nothing. Kragna's massive tail swished, nearly knocking Jack off balance. He stumbled but caught himself, which earned a few impressed murmurs from the tribe. Emboldened by their reaction, and a desperate need not to look completely useless, Jack decided to push his luck. He gently scratched behind Kragna's ears, hoping it would soothe the beast. For a moment it worked. Kragna closed its eyes, emitting a low, rumbling purr that shook the ground beneath them. Jack allowed himself a small, triumphant grin. Hey, look at that! I'm basically the alien Caesar Milan. The purring abruptly stopped. Kragna's eyes snapped open, and it rose to its full height, towering over Jack. The grin vanished from his face as the creature bared its teeth in what could only be described as a warning. Too much, Zaraka called out. You are overwhelming it. Jack threw his hands up. Overwhelming it? Lady, it's a tiger the size of a minivan. I'm the one overwhelmed here. The tribe laughed again, and Jack couldn't help but feel like he was the butt of some cosmic joke. He stepped back, giving Kragna some space, and the creature settled down, watching him with what he could only interpret as mild disdain. Zaraka approached, her expression unreadable. You have begun the bond, she said. But it is not complete. Jack rubbed his temples, feeling a headache coming on. Of course it's not. What's next? Do I have to sing it a lullaby? Write it a poem? Maybe buy it dinner? Zaraka tilted her head, clearly not understanding the sarcasm. You must show your value. Share food. Prove you are not weak. Jack opened his mouth to argue but quickly realized there was no point. The tribe wasn't going to let him off the hook, and Kragna definitely wasn't going to make things easy. Resigned, he reached into his pocket and pulled out an emergency ration bar. Here, he said, holding it out. Bon appetit. Kragna sniffed the bar, then sneezed violently, sending the pathetic snack flying. Jack groaned. Yeah, I wouldn't eat it either. The tribe roared with laughter, some doubling over at the sight. Even Zaraka cracked a small smile. Jack, however, felt anything but amused. Glad my suffering is such a hit. Kragna huffed again, this time nudging Jack's chest with its massive head. Jack staggered but managed to stay upright. Zaraka's expression turned thoughtful. It respects your persistence. Jack snorted. Great. I'll put that on my resume, persistent, but terrible with cats. The moment of levity was short-lived as Zaraka leaned closer, her tone once again serious. The bond will take time. Kragna is not like the others. It is wild, untamed. If you succeed, it will be a great honor. And if I fail? Jack asked, already dreading the answer. Zaraka's lips curved into a faint, almost mischievous smile. Then you will learn why no one has ever tried before. Jack sighed, running a hand through his hair. Fantastic. No pressure or anything. He glanced back at Kragna, who was now watching him with what he swore was a smirk. All right, buddy. Looks like we're stuck with each other. Let's try not to kill me, okay? Kragna growled softly, and Jack wasn't sure if it was agreement or a warning. Either way, he figured his chances of survival were slightly better than zero, which, on this planet, felt like a win. Jack woke up with a start, sprawled out on a makeshift cot in one of the village huts. The previous day's events felt like a fever dream, but the dull ache in his muscles reminded him that it was all too real. Outside, the sounds of the tribe preparing for the day drifted in, chanting, the clinking of metal, and the occasional deep growl of Kragna, who seemed to be lurking nearby. Before he could fully process his predicament, Zaraka entered the hut, ducking under the low doorway with an air of authority. She eyed him critically, her tone as blunt as ever. You look weak. Kragna will sense this. Jack groaned, rubbing his temples. Good morning to you too, Zaraka. Thanks for the vote of confidence. Ignoring his sarcasm, she gestured for him to follow. Jack reluctantly stood, stretching out his sore limbs, and trailed her outside. The sun was already blazing, and the tribe had gathered in a clearing, forming a circle around a large, open area. At the center stood Kragna, its black fur shimmering ominously. What now? Jack muttered. Another bonding exercise? Because I'm pretty sure we already established that I'm not cat whisperer material. Zaraka turned to him, her expression unreadable. Today you will prove your worth in combat. Jack froze. Combat? With what? Please don't say Kragna. Kragna will not fight you. Zaraka replied, as if that was supposed to be reassuring. But it will observe. It must see you are capable of protecting yourself. Protecting it. Jack looked around at the warriors, all of whom were armed to the teeth and built like brick walls. I'm guessing this isn't going to be a friendly sparring match. One of the warriors stepped forward, smirking. She was even taller than Zaraka, with a muscular frame and an air of playful menace. She twirled a staff in her hands, making it clear she was more than ready for the challenge. Her? Jack asked, his voice an octave higher than usual. You want me to fight her? Zaraka crossed her arms. You must show Kragna your strength. Jack sighed, running a hand through his hair. Okay, but let's set some ground rules. No crushing, no breaking, and definitely no killing. Deal? The warrior grinned, clearly not taking him seriously. Jack didn't blame her. He barely took himself seriously. But the tribe was watching, and Kragna's glowing eyes were fixed on him like a spotlight. He didn't have a choice. The warrior lunged first, her staff swinging toward him with alarming speed. Jack yelped, ducking just in time to avoid a direct hit. Whoa, whoa, whoa! I thought we were starting slow! The crowd roared with laughter as Jack stumbled backward, narrowly dodging another swing. He scrambled to grab a nearby stick, using it to clumsily block her next attack. The impact sent a jolt up his arms, and he winced. Okay, maybe we could ease up a bit. I bruise easily. The warrior showed no mercy, pressing her advantage with a flurry of strikes. Jack was forced to think on his feet, dodging and blocking with a mix of desperation and dumb luck. His movements were awkward but effective enough to keep him from getting knocked out cold. At one point, he tripped over a rock, falling flat on his back. The warrior loomed over him, ready to deliver the final blow. Jack panicked, grabbing a handful of dirt and flinging it at her face. She stumbled back, momentarily blinded, and the crowd gasped. Jack scrambled to his feet, holding up his stick like a sword. Dirty move? Sure. But effective. The warrior recovered quickly, her expression shifting from playful to genuinely impressed. She nodded once before stepping back, lowering her weapon. Zaraka stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she assessed Jack. You are resourceful, she said. Not strong, but clever. Jack brushed the dirt off his hands, still catching his breath. I'll take that as a compliment. Probably the nicest thing anyone's said to me all week. The crowd began to murmur, and Jack noticed Kragna watching him intently. The massive cat's tail flicked once, and Jack could have sworn it looked amused. He wasn't sure if that was a good sign or a bad one. Zaraka gestured for him to follow her again, leading him away from the clearing. Kragna is beginning to understand you, she said. But the bond is not complete. You must prove yourself further. Jack groaned. More proving? Lady, I'm running out of tricks here. You will find a way, Zaraka replied simply. Or you will fail. No pressure, Jack muttered under his breath. She brought him to another part of the village, where a smaller group of warriors waited. They were gathered around a table laden with various objects, strange tools, glowing stones, and what looked like alien fruit. Zaraka explained that these were offerings for Kragna, each one representing a different trait: bravery, wisdom, loyalty. You must choose, Zaraka said. This will show Kragna your true nature. Jack stared at the table, feeling the weight of the tribe's expectations bearing down on him. He had no idea what any of these things meant, let alone which one he was supposed to pick. But as he looked at Kragna, who had followed them silently, he realized it didn't matter. The cat didn't care about symbols or offerings. It cared about actions. With that in mind, Jack grabbed one of the glowing stones, mostly because it was the least intimidating option, and held it out to Kragna. The cat sniffed it, then looked up at him with those piercing golden eyes. Jack held his breath, waiting for some kind of reaction. After a tense moment, Kragna huffed and walked away, its tail swishing lazily. The warriors looked puzzled, but Zaraka smiled faintly. It accepts you. Jack blinked. It does? Are we looking at the same cat? Kragna is testing you in its own way, Zaraka said. You have earned its interest. Now you must earn its trust. Jack sighed, running a hand through his hair. Of course. Because nothing on this planet is simple. The tribe began to disperse, leaving Jack alone with Kragna. The cat lay down a few feet away, watching him with an inscrutable expression. Jack sat down on the ground, feeling utterly exhausted. Well, buddy, he said, looks like we're stuck with each other. Might as well figure this out together. Kragna didn't respond, but its tail flicked once in what Jack decided to interpret as agreement. For the first time since landing on this strange planet, he allowed himself a small, hopeful smile. Maybe, just maybe, he could make this work. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the jungle as Jack sat on the edge of a stone ledge overlooking the clearing. He chewed absent-mindedly on an alien fruit that tasted faintly of sour apples and metallic aftertaste. Kragna sat a few feet away, its massive body sprawled out as it groomed itself with slow, deliberate licks. Despite their awkward attempts at bonding, the cat seemed comfortable in his presence now, which Jack considered a small victory. I guess we're making progress, Jack said, glancing at Kragna. The cat flicked an ear in his direction, but otherwise ignored him. Not exactly cuddly, are you? That's fine. I'm not a fan of clingy relationships anyway. Before he could continue his one-sided conversation, Zaraka approached, her steps deliberate and purposeful. She carried a spear in one hand, the polished metal gleaming in the fading light. Her expression was serious, which Jack was beginning to realize was her default setting. It is time, she announced, her voice carrying a weight that made Jack's stomach drop. Time for what? He asked, though he already suspected the answer wouldn't be good. The final test, she said simply, handing him the spear. Jack stared at the weapon, then back at Zaraka. You've got to be kidding me. I thought the combat thing was the test. How many trials does it take to impress a giant house cat? Zaraka ignored his complaint, gesturing toward the jungle. Beyond the trees lies the lair of the Ravager, an ancient predator that has long threatened our tribe. You will face it, with Kragna by your side. Jack froze, the weight of her words sinking in. You want me to fight some alien death machine? Alone? Do I look like a space marine to you? Zaraka's gaze was unyielding. This is not about defeating it. It is about surviving. Kragna must see that you are worthy of standing beside it. Jack let out a hollow laugh, gripping the spear tighter than he meant to. Surviving sounds great in theory, but I'm more of a run away and scream kind of guy when it comes to monsters. You will not be alone, Zaraka said, nodding toward Kragna. The bond between you will be your strength. Jack glanced at the massive cat, which had stopped grooming itself and was now watching him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. Great. So my backup is a moody tiger with trust issues. I feel so much better. The tribe gathered to watch as Jack and Kragna set off into the jungle. The trees loomed above them like skeletal giants, their twisted branches creating an eerie canopy. Jack gripped the spear tightly, his knuckles white, as every sound seemed to echo with the promise of danger. Kragna moved silently beside him, its eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Any chance you've done this before? Jack whispered to the cat. Like maybe you have some secret Ravager killing tricks up your sleeve? Or paw? Kragna didn't respond, of course, but Jack felt a strange sense of reassurance in the creature's presence. As much as he hated to admit it, he was starting to trust the cat. Whether or not that trust was misplaced remained to be seen. The jungle grew darker as they ventured deeper, and the air grew thick with the stench of decay. Jack gagged, covering his nose with his free hand. God, what died out here? Wait, don't answer that. I don't want to know. A low growl rumbled through the air, cutting him off. Jack froze, his heart racing as the sound grew louder, closer. He turned slowly, and his breath caught in his throat. Emerging from the shadows was the Ravager. The creature was massive, easily twice the size of Kragna, with scales that glistened like oil and a mouth full of serrated teeth. Its eyes were a sickly yellow, locked onto Jack with predatory focus. Jack swallowed hard, gripping the spear like a lifeline. Oh, hell no! Kragna stepped forward, its fur bristling as it let out a deep, guttural growl. The Ravager hissed in response, the two creatures sizing each other up. Jack took a step back, his mind racing. Okay, Kragna, you've got this. Go get him, champ. But Kragna didn't charge. Instead, it glanced back at Jack, as if waiting for him to make the first move. Jack's stomach dropped. You've got to be kidding me. You want me to lead? The Ravager lunged, and Jack barely had time to react. He dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the creature's claws. The spear felt useless in his hands, more like a prop than a weapon. Kragna leapt into action, swiping at the Ravager with lightning speed. The two beasts clashed in a whirlwind of teeth and claws, their roars shaking the ground. Jack scrambled to his feet, his mind a chaotic blur. He had no idea what to do, but standing there like a deer in headlights wasn't an option. He gripped the spear tighter, his palms slick with sweat, and circled around the fight, looking for an opening. Kragna managed to pin the Ravager briefly, but the larger creature bucked it off with a powerful thrust of its legs. The Ravager turned its attention to Jack, its sickly eyes narrowing. Jack's blood ran cold as it lunged toward him. Time seemed to slow. Jack raised the spear instinctively, and the Ravager impaled itself on the weapon. The force of the impact sent Jack sprawling backward, the wind knocked out of him. The Ravager let out a deafening screech, thrashing wildly as it tried to dislodge the spear. Kragna seized the opportunity, pouncing on the Ravager and sinking its teeth into the creature's neck. The jungle fell silent as the Ravager collapsed, its body going limp. Jack lay on the ground, gasping for breath, as Kragna stood victorious over the slain predator. For a moment, either of them moved. Then Kragna turned to Jack, its glowing eyes meeting his. There was something different in its gaze now, something almost respectful. Jack managed a shaky laugh, propping himself up on his elbows. Well, that was horrifying. But hey, we lived. That's something, right? Kragna huffed, padding over to him and nudging his shoulder with its massive head. Jack reached up, hesitating for a moment before scratching behind the cat's ears. Yeah, you're the real MVP. Don't let it go to your head. As they made their way back to the village, Jack couldn't help but feel a strange sense of accomplishment. For the first time since crash landing on this bizarre planet, he felt like he might actually belong here. He glanced at Kragna, who walked beside him like a shadow, and smiled faintly. Looks like we make a pretty good team, he said. Just don't expect me to do that again anytime soon. The village erupted in cheers as Jack and Kragna stepped into the clearing, the Ravager's blood still drying on the spear he carried. Warriors banged their weapons against their shields, and even the usually stoic Zaraka allowed a small, approving smile to grace her lips. Jack, on the other hand, was limping and barely holding himself together, his nerves shot to hell. He handed the spear to a nearby warrior, muttering, "Someone else clean that, please. I'm done playing hero for the day." Kragna sauntered beside him, its head held high like it was basking in the adulation. Jack glared at the cat. "Oh sure, you act like you did all the work. I'd like to see you try impaling something with zero upper body strength." The tribe gathered around him, warriors and villagers alike singing a chant Jack couldn't understand. Zaraka stepped forward, raising a hand to silence the crowd. Her voice boomed with authority. "Jack, outsider, you have proven your strength and courage. You are now one of us." Jack blinked, still reeling from the ordeal. "Wait, that's it? I'm in? No more trials, no more killer monsters, no more bonding exercises." Zaraka nodded solemnly. "You have earned your place. And more importantly, you have earned Kragna's respect." Jack glanced at the massive cat, who was grooming itself nonchalantly. "Respect, huh? Sure doesn't look like it. Pretty sure it's just waiting for an excuse to bite my face off." The tribe laughed, though Jack wasn't entirely sure they understood his sarcasm. Zaraka gestured for him to follow her to a raised platform at the center of the clearing. He reluctantly climbed up, wincing as his sore muscles protested every step. Once they were both standing above the crowd, Zaraka placed a hand on his shoulder. "As a member of our tribe, you must now take on a role of honor," she declared. The crowd murmured in agreement, their anticipation palpable. Jack frowned, his suspicion growing. Roll of honor? That sounds a little ominous. Care to elaborate? Zaraka's gaze was unwavering. You will serve as Kragna's companion. The bond between you is sacred. Together you will protect our people and lead us into a new era of strength. Jack blinked, processing her words. Wait a minute. You're saying I'm married to the cat now? Is that what this is? The crowd erupted into laughter, but Zaraka remained serious. Not married. United. You and Kragna are one. Jack groaned, running a hand through his hair. Fantastic. I came here looking for help, and now I'm a glorified cat sitter. Living the dream. Zaraka raised her hand again, and the crowd fell silent. There is one more matter to address, she said, her tone turning lighter. As a member of our tribe, you are also entitled to companionship. Jack's stomach dropped. Companionship? What does that mean exactly? Zaraka gestured toward the gathered warriors. Several of them stepped forward, their towering frames imposing even from a distance. They each held themselves with confidence, their eyes fixed on Jack. His face flushed as the realization dawned on him. Oh no, he said, backing up a step. Oh no. That's not. Look, I'm flattered, really, but I don't think I'm cut out for whatever this is. Zaraka tilted her head, clearly confused by his reluctance. You have proven your strength. It is tradition to reward such bravery with a mate. Jack held up his hands defensively. A mate? Singular, right? Because I feel like I'm getting a very plural vibe here. The tribe laughed again, though Jack's discomfort only grew. One of the warriors stepped forward, a fierce-looking woman with fiery red hair and a scar running down her cheek. She smiled at him, and Jack wasn't sure if it was meant to be reassuring or predatory. You fought well, she said, her voice low and husky. I would be honored to join you. Jack felt like a deer caught in headlights. Thanks? But I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm not really in the market for, tribal arrangements. Another warrior chimed in, a tall, muscular woman with an easy grin. Perhaps you'd prefer someone with a softer touch. She winked, and Jack nearly choked on his own breath. Okay, time out, he said, waving his arms. I appreciate the enthusiasm, but I think I need a minute to process all of this. Zaraka stepped closer, her expression tinged with amusement. It is your choice, Jack. The tribe respects your decision. But choose wisely. Jack looked around, his mind racing. On one hand, he didn't want to offend anyone, especially not people who could crush him with a single hand. On the other hand, the whole situation felt like a bizarre fever dream he couldn't wake up from. Finally, he pointed at Kragna. You know what? I already have a companion. This guy. We're a package deal, right? The tribe burst into laughter, though Zaraka nodded approvingly. A wise choice. But know this, the offer remains. You may choose a mate when you are ready. Jack let out a shaky laugh, feeling like he just dodged a bullet. Thanks. I'll keep that in mind. The feast that followed was equal parts overwhelming and surreal. The tribe celebrated Jack's victory with food, music, and dancing, though he spent most of the night trying to avoid the warriors who had expressed interest in him. Kragna stayed by his side, occasionally growling at anyone who got too close, which Jack found both hilarious and oddly comforting. As the night wore on, Jack found himself sitting with Zaraka near the fire. She handed him a cup filled with a sweet, tangy liquid that burned on the way down. You have done well, she said, her tone softer than usual. The tribe is stronger with you here. Jack raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? I feel like I've been winging it this whole time. Zaraka smiled faintly. Sometimes, improvisation is the greatest strength. You have proven yourself in ways none of us expected. Jack glanced at Kragna, who was now curled up by the fire, its massive body rising and falling with each breath. He smiled despite himself. Yeah, I guess we make a pretty good team. Zaraka nodded, her gaze thoughtful. The bond between you and Kragna is rare. It will guide us to a better future. Jack leaned back, staring up at the stars. For the first time since crash landing on this planet, he felt a strange sense of belonging. It wasn't exactly the adventure he'd signed up for, but maybe, just maybe, it was exactly what he needed. The morning arrived with a golden hue, the alien sun casting its warm light over the village. Jack woke to the soft sounds of activity outside, the rhythmic chants of the tribe blending with the distant calls of the jungle. His body ached from the trials, but he felt a strange sense of calm, a rare moment of peace since his crash landing. Kragna lay nearby, stretched out lazily, its tail flicking back and forth. Jack smirked at the sight. "You look cozy," he muttered, sitting up and stretching. "Glad one of us is enjoying this." Before he could fully shake off the morning fog, Zaraka appeared in the doorway of his hut. Her expression was serious but not unkind. "Jack," she said, her voice steady, "there is one final matter to address." Jack groaned, running a hand through his hair. "Of course there is. What now? Another trial? Do I need to tame a second death cat?" Zaraka shook her head. "No more trials. You have proven yourself. But the bond between you and Kragna must be formalized." Jack blinked, his brow furrowing. "Formalized? Isn't the whole life or death battle thing enough of a formality?" Zaraka gestured for him to follow her. Jack sighed, grabbing his boots and trudging after her into the clearing. The entire tribe was gathered, their faces solemn as they formed a wide circle around a raised stone platform. Kragna padded along beside Jack, its golden eyes scanning the crowd with a mix of indifference and curiosity. As they reached the center of the circle, Zaraka turned to face Jack. "This is our tradition. The bond between a warrior and their P*SSY is sacred. It must be acknowledged before the tribe." Jack's face flushed at her choice of words, though he was too tired to make another joke about it. Instead, he focused on the weight of the moment. The tribe watched him intently, their eyes filled with expectation. Zaraka continued, her voice rising with conviction. "The bond is not just for survival. It is a partnership built on trust and respect. Jack, you have earned Kragna's trust. Now you must accept the bond in return." Jack glanced at Kragna, who was sitting calmly beside him, its massive form radiating a quiet power. Despite everything, the chaos, the fear, the ridiculousness of it all, he felt a strange sense of connection with the creature. It wasn't just about survival anymore. They were a team. "I accept," Jack said, his voice steady. "Whatever this bond thing is, I'm in." The tribe let out a collective cheer, their voices rising in a harmonious chant. Zaraka stepped forward, holding a small, intricately carved blade. Jack tensed, eyeing the weapon warily. What's the knife for? Please tell me this isn't going to involve blood." Zaraka smiled faintly, the closest thing to amusement Jack had seen from her. "Do not worry. It is symbolic." She reached out, cutting a small lock of hair from Jack's head before doing the same with a tuft of fur from Kragna. The two were placed together in a small bowl, which was then lit with a strange, bluish flame. The scent that rose from the bowl was sharp and earthy, filling the air with a sense of finality. "It is done," Zaraka announced. "The bond is sealed." Jack exhaled, relieved that the ceremony didn't involve anything more invasive. The tribe cheered again, and Kragna let out a low, rumbling growl that sounded almost content. Jack looked at the cat, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "Guess we're officially stuck with each other now, huh?" Kragna flicked its tail, and Jack swore he saw a glimmer of approval in its glowing eyes. The rest of the day was a blur of celebration. The tribe hosted another feast, though this one felt less overwhelming now that Jack was starting to understand their customs. Warriors shared stories of past trials, some of them so absurdly dangerous that Jack felt lucky to have survived his own. He even found himself laughing along with their jokes, the tension that had weighed on him since his arrival slowly lifting. As the night wore on, Jack sat by the fire, watching the flames dance. Zaraka joined him, her expression softer than usual. "You have done well," she said. The tribe is stronger with you and Cragna united. Jack chuckled, poking at the fire with a stick. You sure about that? I feel like I've been winging it this whole time. Strength is not just physical, Zaraka replied. It is adaptability, cleverness, the ability to face fear and act anyway. You have all of these. Jack leaned back, gazing up at the stars. The alien constellations were unfamiliar but oddly comforting, a reminder of how far he'd come from the life he'd known. You know, he said after a moment, I never thought I'd say this, but I think I kind of like it here. Zaraka raised an eyebrow. Even with all the trials? Jack laughed. Okay, the trials sucked. But the people? The sense of purpose? That's not so bad. She nodded, her gaze thoughtful. You belong here, Jack. You may not see it yet, but you do. Jack smiled faintly, his eyes drifting to Cragna, who was curled up near the fire. The cat's breathing was slow and steady, its massive form casting long shadows in the flickering light. Yeah, he said quietly. Maybe I do. The fire crackled, and for the first time since his crash landing, Jack felt at peace. This strange, wild planet had thrown everything it had at him, but somehow, he'd come out on the other side stronger, more certain of who he was. And as he sat there, surrounded by the warmth of the fire and the camaraderie of the tribe, he realized he wasn't just surviving anymore. He was living.